Hi everyone, how are you today? Welcome to our GLF event. I'm going to go ahead and invite my colleague Betty. If you just bear with me one second. I hope everyone is having a nice day wherever you are around the world. Hey Betty.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi,
how's it
Ruth.
going? How are you?
Doing well.
Great. Well, everyone, welcome to this GLF Live titled Youth Activists for Demands of Global Governments. Before starting, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Ruth Hollands. I'm from Texas in the United States. I am a researcher for Empodera Clima, which is a part of the Care About Climate organization. And this organization actually helps toward climate justice practices. And as part of Empodera Clima, I advocate for a more gender inclusive platform in climate-based discussions. I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much for GLF for the invitation to participate in this amazing opportunity. Betty, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ruth. I'm Betty Osei Bonsu. I'm from Ghana. I'm an environmentalist and I serve as the project coordinator for Green Africa Youth Organization. We are a youth-led gender balanced advocacy group that focuses on environmental sustainability and community development. Our activities revolve around three thematic areas, which are climate change, disaster risk reduction, and circular economy. We envision to have established institutional mechanism for youth engagement in climate change and policies for disaster risk reduction as well as climate change, whilst we also promote the support of private, public, and informal waste management stakeholders to maximize the potential of zero waste in peri-urban communities. It's a privilege to be on this platform with Ruth and to be among the two chosen to share the open letter to you all. In the last 2 months, Ruth and I, together with other youths and organizations, have been involved with the Global Landscape Forum and the Youth in Landscape Initiative to write an open letter as a follow-up for the Global Landscape Biodiversity event and to open a biodiversity policy recommendation report. It's surprising that after attending the 2-day conferences, hearing from scientists, policymakers, activists, indigenous people, youth, and many more, we decided to focus around 4 demands. And these demands, I refer to them as the 3 T's and the 1 I. We demand for transparency, we demand for transformative education, we demand for transformative action and inclusion. Today, together with you, our audience, we want to explore this letter and additionally tie it to our various experiences in our geographical locations that can be in our regions, in the globe, and in our communities. Thank you.
Right, yeah, Betty is right. Just with her, we did have an opportunity to work with youth movements from around the world, from Sri Lanka to Ivory Coast to Colombia. And it was a very wholesome and great experience to work with everyone and see, how their regions and how their environments were able to been affected by the climate crisis and how they will continue to be affected. Um, and so during this GLF Live, we will first have a conversation on the letter, and we will also spare some time at the end to answer any and all questions that you may have. So yeah, let's get started, Betty. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. I
Perfect.
can hear you perfectly.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So if you don't mind, Betty, I'd like to go ahead and start with just a brief description of the letter that we wrote. So essentially, the youth letter was written, as we mentioned before, by about 18 youth organizations around the world, and we came together to kind of draft like our main ideas of how, of what what demands we would like to make to world leaders and decision makers on what we feel is needed to provide a more environmentally friendly environment. And so a couple of the key demands that we made were for transparency, with governments and groups and local communities, transformative education, inclusion in these conversations, transformative action, and overall just more opportunities for us to voice our opinions as youth movements and as experts, as growing experts in this field. And so yeah, it's been a very rewarding experience, and we're
Yeah.
very happy to be here to talk to you about those
I,
demands.
I tell you, it was really intriguing to see youth collaborate from different aspects in life on demands that require urgent attention. Our diversity were not hindrances, our geographical locations were not hindrances, culture, neither color were hindrances. All we thought about was just collectively contributing to socio-ecological crisis, because this is the time for action. Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world, because indeed it's the only thing that has ever has." So this even brings me to the question, Ruth, I'm very curious to know, what is your favorite part of the letter, and why and how does it relate to you and your country?
Sure, thank you. Well, I really appreciate our demand for inclusivity. I often have been I've seen how we lack inclusivity in many of our institutions, not only in the United States, but from speaking to colleagues from around the world and working on this letter, there's misrepresentation of the various communities who actively work on ensuring that we are, positive influences to our environment, that we take care of the world's health. And so I really feel that we need to be more open and even a little bit more stern about how there needs to be more representation of the different genders, of different communities and groups who are actually well read and have the proper experience to make these decisions that affect all of us. We often see an inequality of genders even in our discussions here in the United States, and I strongly believe that that needs to change, because there are so many groups who are affected by the policymakers, the policies that they make, and the regulations that are created. And unfortunately, there's not enough representation, and there's not enough consideration of these groups, and it ends up, being poorly, and it just trickles down to the people who are the most victimized by these policies and these standards. And so I really do feel like it's something that we constantly talk about, but there's not enough action towards that. And so I would really like to see that going forward in the future. I would really like to see decision makers and policymakers and world leaders really take this into consideration, that more women need to be involved, more indigenous groups need to be involved, and these groups should also be protected, because that is something else that we don't really pay attention to, or we kind of missed when we're trying to when we say that we're trying to improve our environmentally practices, and all of that kind of structured um, influence in our environment. So what about you? Being from Ghana, how do you feel about this?
Great, 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 great. I love your contribution on this particular aspect of the letter. This also syncs with the aspect I really feel attached to, which is the demand for transformative action. Here, some particular sentences caught my attention, and some of them that were highlighted were the disproportionate impact of biodiversity and climate crisis. Looking at the global south and the global north, it is seen that both areas are distinctively different. They share different when it comes to culture, when it comes to everything wise, everything is different. You have the global south being undeveloped and the global north being so developed. This shows that, and you can tell that climate change is disproportionately being felt here in the global south more than which is being felt in the global north. You have more of the effects that they produce being seen here. And it's not only on the geographical distinction, however, even where we are, when it comes to the global south and you boil it down to Africa, we have disproportionate impact of biodiversity and climate crisis. When you also boil it down to Ghana itself, we face the same thing. When you come to Ghana here, you have the northern aspects of Ghana experiencing more of climate change than the southern or the western part. And we had, once Green Africa Youth Organization, we had a project with urban informal waste pickers, and we're able to deduce through findings that majority of the informal waste pickers migrated from the northern sector of Ghana just due to the effects, the environmental effect they face there, wanting to look for revenue and generate revenue. So just imagine the effects of even climate change itself, making people migrate from one location to another just because of all this effect. If you look at the northern region of Ghana, they face several effects ranging from increasing temperature to deforestation, sandstorms, lack of water, and many more. Another aspect that was highlighted was the marginalization of women, youth, children, and indigenous people. This must stop. Women, these people are the less powerful when you are, that is in Africa here, they are just so the less powerful. However, we still tend to marginalize them when it comes to inclusivity and then making demands. They are left out in decision making. When you go to the northern region, they're not able to make, they're not able to even own lands or make decisions themselves, which is very bad. Another aspect in the transformative action was a requirement for representation in governments, in governance. And this is a particular gap where GAIO intends to fulfill in the future, to establish a Youth for Climate Council so that we can have youthful population being able to develop that bottom-up approach of inclusivity in making decisions, so that it would not only be the leaders making the decisions for us, but we, the youth, can also have a say. And lastly, the synergy that must exist between decision makers, leaders, youth-led networks, and upon the drivers that degrade the environment. It's very important that all stakeholders come together to make decisions. It's not okay for only our leaders to make the decisions. No.
Right.
We should be able to come together, the youth, everybody, we are all stakeholders of the environment. We should be able to come together and take collective action. This is the time that the complaints must stop. This is the time that youthful demonstrations, holding placards, should end. This is the time for action. So this even brings me the global north and the global south. Let me ask you a question, Ruth. The global north, the south have lots of differences. What are some of the hindrances you see in effectively achieving the demands that have been highlighted in the policy letter?
That's an excellent question. So as a citizen of the global north, I can't ignore how our practices really do end up affecting negatively, for the most part, the global south. And one of the points in our letter, excuse me, was, as you said, we need to be more, or countries need to be more inclusive, and they need to be better educated on the relationship between humans and the environment, because there is a lot of give or take. And so I really do wish to see more I guess better examples from the global north on how to take care of our environment. I am from Texas, which is a big oil and gas state, And in general, the United States is a big oil and gas country. And so, there are many practices that we can do better, or that we can pay more attention to make sure that we don't negatively affect the environments where we, do go and work on. And then domestically as well, there are a lot of events that do happen here where they are specifically affected due to climate change and the climate crisis, and our refusal as a country to do more about this phenomenon. We do have deforestation. We have several forest fires every year. There's very obvious effects of climate change, and in the having the hottest days in the summer every year, that rising temperature every year. We have a disastrous hurricane season here in the South, where it makes the news how terrible it affects a lot of people. And you see the same thing in the global South. You see how all of these incidents affect people. And so I do believe that the global north needs to be better in their practices, in their practices on taking care of the environment, be not only in energy, also in agricultural practices, and also I do feel strongly that we need to, in some sorts, lead by example, and show the world that it is possible to pay more attention to the environment, and it is possible to educate our youth and pay attention to these groups, so that we know exactly what it is that we need to do to make sure that everyone is in a safe place. And it's a very interesting it's a very interesting relationship that humans have with the environment, because right now, as we are in this global pandemic, it all comes down to that relationship we have with our environment, where these kinds of pandemics occur based on it could be based on just simply our proximity to certain livestock, certain animals. And that's something, for me, this experience with the open letter, that's something that I learned about. And I was basically an example of how that transformative education can really help us understand how important our relationship is with the environment, and how everything that we do every day affects us and affects our neighbors. And so, because the global north does a lot of damage to the global south by refusing to implement measures that are more environmentally friendly, that's just an example of how we affect each other, even though we're thousands of miles away. You guys do see that effect, and it's just a cycle. And so we need to definitely work together to make sure that we reach a place where we all help each other, because we all share the earth, and this is going to keep affecting us, and not necessarily in a positive way, but we need to make sure that we take those steps so that we can actually bring on about positive change to our environment and to biodiversity worldwide.
Yeah.
And what do you feel? How do you feel about this? Is this something that that you've been kind of thinking about lately, especially with how crazy the environment has been, and all of the changes we've seen in just a small amount of years?
Yes, and especially even taking into consideration the COVID-19 and everything. When you look at the question I asked you, the hindrances when it comes to implementing the demands we've stated, the four demands. If I'm to link them with respect to the demands we've made in Africa here, I can tell you that the global north will be able to achieve theirs faster than the global south. For example, taking into consideration the transformative education. Over here in Africa, what can hinder us is the lack of resources and inaccessibility to undeveloped areas and communities. Because if we don't have the resources to actually put together the education to disseminate, we can't actually make any education as even transformative in the first place. if we are not able to get access to areas in Africa, because those are major issues we face here. A lot of areas are closed up. A lot of areas are closed up in Africa. The roads are bad to access. The government reach the areas they can. When it comes to waste management, they reach the areas they can, and the areas that cannot be reached are taken care of by other individuals, like the informal waste speakers. And it covers diverse field. And when it also comes to transparency, you can look at culture and social beliefs. Transparency, the access to information. Culture here in Africa is somewhat where the younger ones are always looking up to the elderly ones. They don't have say. They are made to say yes or no to their elderly ones. So if you don't take care, culture and then social beliefs can really hinder us from achieving the transparency, because the government tend to tell us that, oh, the ladies are not really of importance, so and this particular person has more say than this particular person. So it's quite baffling. And when it also comes to transformative action, you can have this disagreement in decision making. Content as the public, if you're content in your particular field, we know that, okay, I already have all what I want. My environment around me is looking perfect. I don't need to demand for any other thing. But when you can also have conflict hindering transformative action, because conflict not only personally, in terms of even organizations, CSO organizations, this particular organization says, I am better than this other particular organization. I'm not going to work with this particular person. We have to see ourselves as one. That is only when we can be able to take a stand and make a particular action. As the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall. And lastly, it comes to inclusion. When it comes to inclusion, what can hinder us is marginalization, social rankings, and leadership. Marginalization, when it comes to inclusion, the women don't have a say. Okay, so why should we even actually involve them in the same place? Why should we involve the youth? What do they really have to say? These are the things that can hinder us from achieving inclusion. Social ranking, this person is better than the other person. This can hinder us. And lastly, leadership. If a particular leader really is leading the particular population well, we can get inclusion. He should know when to be autocratic, he should know when to be democratic. This all includes, and then will make us inclusive if we really want to be. So all these listed are what can hinder us from actually achieving the demands, the 4 demands we've stated on the letter. So as I said, it's possible that the global north will be able to achieve their demands more than the global south. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Betty. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions now from our audience.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and ask you this first one. A viewer asked, how optimistic do you feel that policymakers will hear and take action on all of these demands?
First of all, I'm very optimistic that our leaders or policymakers will actually listen to it. That is one. First of all, we've already come together as youth.
Sure.
There's a saying that there is unity and there is power in collaborativeness. So as we've gotten this collaborativeness already, all we need from the public now is just to sign the letter and say, yes, I really consent to what they're saying. I share the notive that we need one health, one world, one health. So that's the answer I can give to that question. I'm very, very optimistic about this, that they are going to listen to our call and our voice.
Absolutely. Yeah. I share the same passion. I'm very optimistic, and we're going to keep working on this. We're going to keep making sure that we make the best attempts to make our voice heard and our demands heard, and work with other youth movements to work together and keep fighting this fight, because it's obviously very important for us, but it's, it affects all of us. As Betty said, we are one world, one health, and we need to keep working so that we can reach that. And it looks like Betty is a little lagged, but it's okay. We'll continue. There's been another question saying, what can the average person do by themselves to generate change collectively? Well, as Betty mentioned, it's really important for us to be more attentive to the different changes and to, educate ourselves in all of these movements and all of these demands that ultimately do contribute to a collective action. And so, it's necessary to read about it, to be on social media, to share about these collective efforts. And personally, you can also just go ahead and if you have the time or the desire to, there's plenty of NGOs and organizations and grassroots movements in our communities worldwide that actually, try really hard to go on and put out this message and influence those decision makers and those leaders in our community. And who knows, one day those same youth who are contributing so much, they will be the decision makers and the world leaders. And this is why we're starting this, because if we need it to snowball into something that's going to affect change at a greater cause, at a greater scale. And so it's important that we continue working on this, on these efforts. Betty, I was just answering a question. It was, what can the average person do by themselves to generate change collectively? And I basically spoke about, joining our youth movements and, making sure that you are allies and that you work with us so that we can achieve greater change. And so, well, we are reaching towards the end of this session, this live. And so everyone who had questions, thank you so much. Betty, did you want to add anything before we
I
wrap?
would like to ask you a question, but I think we are far behind time. So I would like to thank everyone for the questions that they have asked and for being with us today. And thank you, Ruth, for this inspiring conversation. But before ending, I would love for us to take a little quote from the open letter, if possible. So, Ruth, would you like to take the lead?
Oh,
Any quote
sure.
you see that resonates with
Absolutely. Thank
you?
you, Betty. Right. Okay, so the current patterns of production, consumption, landscape degradation, and pollution have led to the many challenges that all generations are collectively facing, particularly the biodiversity, climate, and health crises.
Great. And as youth, we are already taking action on these issues. Now we have to urge world leaders, decision makers, civil society organizations, and individuals to recognize the importance of sustaining a healthy planet and addressing the inevitable product of our capitalist and colonial system. We need everyone, everybody, to realize that the earth's health is our health and that having a safe place to call a home is not an option, but a fundamental human right.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you all for joining us. If the open letter we wrote resonates with you, we encourage you to add your signature or a comment using our online form, which we actually linked to our bio on the Global Landscapes Forum page. So thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to all of you, and thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thanks, Betty.
Thank you to all the best.
Bye.
Bye.